We'll have this recorded and sent out to you. Thanks for joining. We try and host these webinars pretty often. We've been on a weekly basis. And our goal here is really just to talk about what's happening in the space that we're in, which is pen testing, attack surface management writ large, and agentic AI. I just came back from RSA conference in San Francisco, and I can tell you the only thing people are talking about is agentic AI, and in particular, safety of agentic AI. And there are a number of firms that are talking about agentic pen testing, which is what we're going to talk about. What I hope to do today is just give you sort of a guide to how things are changing rapidly in this space of pen testing, give you a little bit of history of where we were, where we've been, and where we're going. So I wanted to lead with a little bit of a controversial take that scripted automation is dead, and this is where things are going. Now, I'll also include at the end, if we have some time, a little bit of demos of how this works. But let's talk a little bit about how things are looking today. So today, if you're using a pen testing solution, you typically will run a pen test, and it'll come back and say, okay, here's a whole bunch of criticals that could result in system compromise. But the more important question is, okay, but how will a hacker actually use these criticals to find what matters, right? What we care about are outcomes. We don't necessarily need all the detail of this vulnerability and that vulnerability. And that's really what we're focused on, is how do we identify those attack paths in a network. So let's talk about scripted automation. I liken where we are today with scripted automation to where script kiddies were like 20 years ago. Script kiddies are basically, novice hackers that are just using other tools that other hackers wrote, right? And so that's kind of what scripted pen testing is. You scan a network, you find potentially insecure services, you find their vulnerabilities, you attempt to exploit them, and then you follow a playbook, right? A predefined script that says, okay, let's try this, then that, then the other. What the distinction between a scripted automation playbook and that of a hacker is, a real hacker will get to some beachhead point, usually via spear phishing. Once they're there, they will look around, usually with a scan, observe, reason, and adapt, right? They're going to look for, okay, I'm here. Where's my AD server? How do I find accounts? What can I compromise? More importantly, where are the crown jewels on this network, which is what they're after. They're not just after machines. They're typically after account takeover, and then, what's valuable on those devices, or the ability to, of course, drop ransomware and exploit. So now we progress from scripted automation to agentic reasoning. And what's helpful to understand is how agentic works, right? So it's important to realize that agentic reasoning builds on top of all the capabilities we've already built to date, right? So continuous scanning gives you the attack surface that you can potentially exploit. That's important, right? So being able to enumerate those attack surfaces in the first place is important. Once you understand that, an agent can then reason, what is my goal, right? What's the data I can access? If you're on our webcast last week, we talked about a release of Crown Jewels, which is a way of finding sensitive data on the network, that then determines your goal, right? What am I after? Are there weak credentials that can go compromise? Are there unprotected accounts that can also compromise? All this kind of factors into the reasoning. Obviously, you want to persist as devices are updated, and then adapt, right? So even if you have one attack chain to a device or to data, you want to have multiple in case that attack chain gets taken away. So the bottom line here is you're moving from playbooks using kind of fixed paths to goal-oriented reasoning. How do I get there? What's the best path? So if you look at security today, and you guys probably all manage networks, buy security tools, the way that it really works is you're buying security in silos, stovepipes, whatever you want to call it. But basically, it's almost like one tool per attack surface, right? And it's almost like tools stick to their lanes, but we know the bad guys don't. Bad guys don't care about lanes and silos and stovepipes. Um, what you actually need is to be able to look across these different attack surfaces, correlate these different risk signals, and be able to tie them together. We call that compound risk. So the example here is on the dark web, you find a leaked admin credential. Um, you that's a dark web search. Then you go to another tool and say, okay, I see that your MFA is disabled on that account in M365. That's sort of a separate signal that you found, right? That a different tool found. And then a third tool might do that pen test, on the network and say, look, we found this, remote control exploit, which allows me to remotely access that device. So that's yet another signal, but typically 3 isolated findings, none of which by itself would cause you to say, okay, let's ring the alarm bells, but each of which probably needs addressing. Well, an adversary knows how to tie that together. And that, in fact, is what agentic AI is able to do as well by tying together these compound risk signals. So going back to the original example, the AI won't say, oh, here's 47 criticals, let me go patch them. Agentic pen testing says, hey, I see this dark web account, this account compromise on the dark web. I also see that this account was unprotected in M365. And then I can see on the network where there's an RCE that's exploitable that can get me to data on that person's device, right? So that's how agentic reasoning works. It looks at compound risk signals, it ties them together, and it creates attack chains to the device or the account that they're targeting. Now, here's a real opportunity that you should be really attuned to. And it pulls together these traditionally very hard problems, the detection problem, which, we talked about the compound risk, tying things together, and then the patching / remediation problem. So traditionally, these have been different groups and different initiatives. Where Agentic gives you a real leg up is to say, hey, if I can find all the attack chains to a device and data, well, I can then harden those selectively, the agent itself, and that autonomous hardening actually can break those attack chains from a security point of view. That runs as a separate process from your patch management, as an example, via your RMM. And if we look at, what that cycle time looks like, if you were to hire a pen testing group, they would come in, that takes some time to schedule. They would run a pen test that takes a week or two. another week or two for that report to be written, delivered to the client, and then the hardening activity that needs to happen. On average, it's 47 days from that pen test. Scripted automation can significantly accelerate that. That's great. But you're still trying to do these remediations, isolated from the actual attack itself. Agentic actually allows you to harden these paths right away. So once you identify the attack chains, you can come right back behind them and harden those attack paths, which is risk management, right? Risk management is identifying the risk that can be exploited and then selectively hardening those assets and doing that in hours, not in weeks. So that is one of the real kickers that we can get with agentic pen testing is autonomous hardening as well. I'm going to keep pressing forward, and then I'll take a look back and see if there's any questions that may have come up. So let's talk about what this means from a business point of view. Some of you may have clients where you are bringing in a pen testing group, typically because your client requires it, right? So if you're in financial services, that's usually a requirement. Every 3 years, you got to change out your pen testing group. And that's outsourced pen testing, right? So you're outsourcing that business. It's a smaller margin to do that. And it's very costly. Worse, it's once a year. It's a snapshot in time. We know doesn't represent the other, 11 and a half months of the year where that business is potentially exploitable. The transition is to automated pen testing, which ThreatMate offers automated pen testing along with some of the others. And typically what we see is you can charge about $2,500 to $3,500 US per pen test. That's great. Quarterly pen testing. By the way, that's much better than annual. We support continuous, but that's your choice. You figure out what works for your client. The nice part about that is you can deliver automated pen testing yourself. In-house delivered means higher margin work, right? You don't need to outsource that. The future where we're going and the rest of the space in 2026 is going is continuous validation via agentic. And what's really cool about this is not only can you reason like an adversary versus scripted playbooks, you can do this nearly continuously, but more importantly, you can do that autonomous hardening. And so here, this becomes a monthly recurring business between 1K and 5K per month for those clients where you're basically able to show them this is how an adversary would get in. And I'm going to show you adversarial profiles, which is super cool. So you can emulate different adversaries, show them how they would actually get in and actually get to the crown jewels, which we also identify. And you get the autonomous hardening behind it. So remember, this is hard to remember, but clients don't pay for tools, they pay for outcomes, right? They're looking for risk reduction. They're not looking for yet another tool. So you're delivering the outcome. Obviously, you're using tooling to deliver that outcome. So, in terms of capabilities, we look at on an agentic side across the different attack surfaces. We don't need to go too much into the competitive analysis. I really don't care. But let's talk a little bit about history, right? So if you think about in the 2010s where everything was pen testing was driven by humans, right? The humans were good, right? But typically they stopped when they found the flag, right? Capture the flag, prove this is how I'd get in, here's how I'd exploit. So the good part was they were very good because they were adaptive, they could reason, they would be able to show you how an adversary get on the network. That's awesome. The bad part was they typically stopped when they found that one path. And that was when we got to scripted automation, one of the real benefits, and I think this timeline is actually a little bit shifted left. It's more like 2020 on is when you start to get scripted automation. And this is when, you know, you could actually, it's the script kiddie era of pen testing. You could run pen testing against all the devices. So it wasn't just the one path where you stop. You could find all these exploitable vulnerabilities, which was great. We can automate it. You don't need to be a security subject matter expert to do this. You can do this yourself in-house. That's what's in the platform today, that you can get off the shelf and start running. And if you haven't, you should. And by the way, you know, all this stuff is a journey. So you start with vulnerability assessment, you then move on to automated pen testing. That'll tell you which ones of these are actually exploitable. And then you upgrade to agentic, right? So here you want to not only, well, scripted automation to network autonomy really talks about, across compound surfaces, which is really good. But you don't have the reasoning of agentic. Agentic now gives you full spectrum across these different attack surfaces, from dark web to cloud to behind the firewall. More importantly, intelligent reasoning. That actually almost is full circle back to the manual consultants. Now you can actually adapt and reason on the fly, and you don't need an expensive pen tester to do that, right? So this is where things are going. This technology is in hand. This capability is being released, and I'll show you it. But this is exactly where things are going. So now let's put all these things together. If you look at MSP demand, continuous automation is just expected now, but we don't want endless alerts, right? At the same time, attack surface explosion. All the talk at the RSA conference right now is about the attack surface driven by agents. I just wrote a blog about how one of my agents went rogue on me and got me banned from Facebook. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, it's a super interesting article. Either check out my LinkedIn or go to our webpage, look under blogs and read it. But basically, the attack surface is exploding. And then finally, we have AIs that can reason. And this is a powerful capability that, by the way, the adversaries are using. So here's the rub, right? I know I'm talking about next gen stuff, but the next gen stuff is being used by adversaries right now. And this is your window, right? This is your window of opportunity, because the bad guys are using AI reasoning to find these exploitable paths and networks. So it really is almost a race between who's going to get there first. Are you going to use AI first to find those exploitable paths in your client networks and then harden behind? Or are you going to wait for an adversary to do the same thing? They're not going to harden, they're going to persist. They will exploit, persist, hold ransom, take data, leak on the web, sell accounts, you name it, right? So it is a race between you and the adversary, who's going to get there first. And that's your choice with your clients, right? So let me now do a couple things. I'm going to take a look. If you have any questions, now's a great time to ask them. And I'm going to take a look and see if we have any here. I'm on chat. All right, I don't see any questions, but go ahead and type in any questions you may have. The good news, no one said, hey, I can't hear you. That would have been terrible. But at the same time, what I will do is prepare to share some demos, kind of show you what's going on here. I see Reed is typing. Well, let me go through this real quick. So I first kind of want to show you what agentic pen testing looks like. So in this window, this is Nexus. Um, this allows you to run full agentic pen testing across the network. Here is a diagram view of the network. And these are the various stages of what's called the Lockheed Martin kill chain, the various stages that an agent would follow in order to start with recon all the way to actions on objective. One thing that we have added in, and by the way, these are the hosts over here. One thing that we've added in is the ability to emulate adversaries. And these are the various adversaries that target the SMB space that the MSP sell to. And what you can do is choose your adversary based on your client. So if you have clients in retail, hospitality, you probably want to choose Fin 7. And when you mouse over Fin 7, also called Carbonac, you'll see where are they from, Russia, Ukraine, what are they after, card theft, and then more importantly, what are their techniques? So these techniques come from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and we will actually employ these techniques on the network to see if in fact they can exploit. Storm 0501, Lockbit, or ransomware groups, right? So you want to be able to emulate these as well. But yeah, once you do that, you can now deploy that attack. I'm sorry, that profile, that adversary profile. I call them villain cards. And so what it'll do is basically just start launching an attack. I like to go into full self-drive mode, which is just let the agent do its thing. You can also step it through and choose and actually choose methods you want to actually deploy. But it'll go ahead and run through a complete analysis of the network. Now, we have enumerated the attack surface of the network, so it does have that advantage that's fed into the agent. So it knows it'll compute all the attack paths after choosing its targets, and so it'll then just follow these the Lockheed Martin kill chain, and you can see that play out. And it's just stepping you through what it's doing. It's running different tools like Mimikatz. You can see exploits complete, and now you can see some compromised devices where it's now installing payload. After that, it reaches back to its command and control. Another device compromised. Yeah. And then finally, it takes this. It's the last bit here is actions on objective. Yeah. And there we go. The mission's complete. All kill chain phase is executed. And then you can go to findings, and you can see it was able to compromise these 6 devices. And these 2 it failed on. As the 2 exploits failed, 3 flags were captured, 10 hosts were tested, and that's your finding. I'm now going to switch over to, so that was the actual pen test view. This is your compound risk analysis view, which is really what you want. You want to look across these different attack surfaces, and you want to do it. You want to orchestrate it with an agent. So what we can do is talk to this agent and say, okay, we want to do an assessment for this group. And what it'll now do is look at all the different ways an attacker would actually target and compromise this. So it's asking for approval to do this. And so what it does is it'll now launch, again, this compound risk assessment. So the first is the dark web reconnaissance. And by the way, we have some of these tools available for free on our website. If you go to threatmate.com, under free, under resources, you'll find some free tools like Dark Web Scanner. Definitely use it. Enter a domain that you want to see a dark web assessment for any of your clients. And the stuff that it comes up with is pretty good. Here, this is one dark web assessment where 23 credentials were found, 8 are still active, 3 stealer infections, like info stealers. We find a lot of those, compromised documents. Give it a try. Darkwebscanner.threatmate.com. You'll be amazed at what you can find about your clients. Launch a phishing campaign, do an external scan. So here we'll find all exposed ports, what their risk is, any certificate issues, and then we'll analyze M365 as well. This is all native to the platform, right? So 4 out of 6 global admins don't have MFA, right? You can break it down by department. That's really bad. Behind the firewall network vulnerability scan. This is what gives you all the attack surface that's then used by the agentic agent, right? So this is the attack surface that was essentially found by our vulnerability scanner. And then the pen test over here. This is what I showed you earlier. So it'll go through that. While that's running, let me see if I can find any questions. All right, so Reed says, I'm interested in seeing how the agentic market evolves in it. Yeah. Shortage of hardware, not enough Mac minis? Yeah, no, I mean, so here's my opinion, Reed. What's happening right now is these kinds of tools that I'm showing you right now are being used by the bad guys. And so what you'll see is more and more compromise by adversaries and slow adoption per usual by companies, right? The opportunity here is to get out in front with these kinds of testing technologies. What you want to do is you want to find these attack chains before the adversary does. That's what your goal should be. And so that pen testing is done. Next, we want to now run the autonomous hardening. So here, once we understand the attack chains, which we got from the last analysis, we can go harden those assets and patch the stuff that gets exploited. And that's really key. So here, we're able to break 4 of the 4 attack chains by hardening just 4 hosts. We didn't have to run full patch management across the entire thing, but we only mitigated 9 CVEs, right? There's probably hundreds that we could have done, but it ended up breaking 4 of those attack chains. Yeah, and then we can do a rescan, right? So the rescan will run the same agentic pen testing against the network and attempt to, it'll run the whole gamut, play it back and see if we can exploit any of these. And it didn't. So that was really what I was hoping to accomplish today. I know we're a little bit past time, but we also started a little bit late. So again, highly recommend that you check out some of our capabilities. Let me see if I can show you. So threatmate.com, go to resources, free security tools, and check these out, right? So go to Dark Web Insights, click on it, enter a domain that you want, right? And run the scan, right? do that. You can also do a free website pen test. This will tell you what's on the dark web. This will actually run a pen test on that website. Really cool. You can also test your firewall with the network perimeter scan. If you want to audit a website using OWASP, run this. So that's all I got for today. Thank you for joining, and we'll send a copy of this out as well to you guys.